All right, let's dive into the workbook from A Course in Miracles. We're talking about a one-year training program that makes a pretty bold promise to completely change the way we see the world. And it all starts by tackling something we all do every single day, getting upset. Of course you have, right? It's a daily thing. Someone cuts you off in traffic, your boss says something unfair, you get some bad news, and boom. The cause seems so obvious. It's out there. And we feel totally certain that whatever happened out there is why we feel so bad in here. But right out of the gate, the workbook throws a wrench in all of that with this radical idea. It's basically saying our entire understanding of what causes our own pain is just wrong. It's a huge claim, and honestly, it's the very first step on this wild journey to a completely different way of seeing things. So, okay, if we're not upset for the reasons we think, then what is the real reason? That's what we're going to get into first. We're going to look at the course's, let's call it, startling diagnosis for all our emotional distress. You know, the course does something pretty interesting here. It takes all of these feelings, fear, worry, anger, you name it, and just groups them all under one simple banner: upset. Now, we might think that a tiny annoyance is a world away from deep anger, but the workbook says, nope, they're all just different flavors of the exact same disturbance. The specific form it takes, that's not the real issue. And this leads to a really fascinating idea. If all these upsets are basically the same, then there's no such thing as a small one. Every single disturbance, whether it feels huge or tiny, is treated as equally disruptive. And why is that? Because they all point back to the exact same, single, fundamental mistake in how we're seeing the world. And here it is, the bombshell diagnosis. The reason we're upset isn't because of a person or an event outside of us. The course argues it's something internal that we are literally projecting outward. We are, in essence, reacting to a movie that we're directing and producing inside our own heads. So that leads us to this massive concept in the course's whole way of thinking: projection. Let's really dig into this idea, how the world we think we're living in is actually just a screen for our own mind. I mean, this is one of the most direct statements you'll find. And it's not being poetic or metaphorical here. It's saying point blank that the world you see with your eyes is not some objective reality. It's a mirror reflecting what's already happening inside your mind. The inner world and the outer world, they're one and the same. So this is the crucial shift it's asking us to make. Our default setting, right, is to see ourselves as victims of what's happening around us. The course flips that completely and says, what if your feelings are actually caused by your internal thoughts? Making that switch is the whole game. But why are we projecting these thoughts? Well, it's because we're not really seeing the present moment at all. So why are we stuck seeing the past? This framework has a very specific answer. It says our whole experience of time is a creation of what it calls the ego. It all starts with one foundational mistake, this tiny, mad idea that we separated from our source. That thought becomes the past. Then, in the present, that feeling of separation creates this deep, nagging guilt. And of course, that guilt makes us fear a future punishment. So you see, our entire timeline is built on this one sequence: a past mistake, leading to present guilt, which creates future fear. Okay, wow. So if our perception is that fundamentally flawed, what are we supposed to do about it? And that's where we get to the workbook itself. It's not just a book of ideas, it's presented as the practical, step-by-step solution. Yeah, the workbook isn't something you just read and debate. Think of it more like a training manual for your mind. Its purpose is incredibly systematic and, let's be honest, ambitious, to totally retrain your mind using 365 daily exercises to see absolutely everything and everyone in a new light. And this whole journey is broken into two really distinct parts. Part one is all about demolition. It's focused on undoing that ego thought system we just talked about, the one built on separation, guilt, and fear. You have to clear out all that old debris first. And only then can part two begin, building a whole new way of seeing, which it calls true perception. Now, you might be hearing all of this and thinking, this is insane, I don't believe a word of it. And you know what? The workbook totally anticipates that. It basically says your belief doesn't matter one bit. It doesn't ask for your agreement. It doesn't even ask you to accept the ideas. All it asks is that you do the exercises. Just use them. The act of practicing them is what will show you what they mean. So, if the practice is everything, what does it actually look like? Well, the core method of the entire workbook boils down to one word: generalization. This means you have to apply every single lesson to everything and everyone without making a single solitary exception. The easiest way to get your head around this is to think about learning math as a kid. You start with really specific examples, right? 2 plus 2 is 4, 5 times 5 is 25. But the goal isn't just to memorize answers. The goal is to learn the principles of addition and multiplication so you can apply them to any numbers you encounter. The workbook is the exact same idea. You practice with a specific person or a chair or a car to learn a universal principle that applies to everything. And this is why this no exceptions rule is so critical. The course is totally black and white on this. If you hold on to just one person you refuse to forgive, or one situation you decide this doesn't apply to, you make the whole goal impossible. You can't be a little bit willing to see differently. It's an all or nothing deal. But why? Why is it all or nothing? Because from this perspective, everything we see in the physical world is just part of the same big illusion. Now, we instinctively believe our body is way more important than, say, a button on our shirt. But the Course calls this a hierarchy of illusions. It says that since none of it is ultimately real in the spiritual sense, there are no actual levels of importance. A pen, a hand, a button, a body, they're all equally perfect subjects for your practice. So let's see how these really big, abstract ideas get put into concrete practice from the moment you open the workbook. We're talking page 1, lesson 1. Just look at the logical progression here. It's a systematic demolition of your reality. First, lesson 1 says nothing you see means anything. Then, lesson 2 tells you why, because you're the one who slapped all the meaning onto it in the first place. And by lesson 7, you get the final piece of the puzzle. The reason for all of it is because the meaning you're projecting comes entirely from your past. It's this perfect chain of logic designed to completely undo your world. And that really brings us to the final provocative question that this whole training is leading to. After all the undoing, the practicing, the letting go of judgments, what would happen? What would you actually see if you could look at the world right now, in this instant, without the filter of your entire past? What would be left? And that question, well, that's the promise the workbook leaves us with.